The funny thing about getting old is people start acting like you're already halfway gone, even when you can hear every word they say. That's how I knew what was coming before they even touched my chair. I was sitting at the edge of the lake in that damned wheelchair they insisted I needed for safety, wrapped in a blanket like a child, watching the water I used to swim across for fun when I was a girl. The sun was low, the dock creaking under us, and behind me I could hear my grandson and his wife whispering. I wasn't meant to hear, I suppose. Deaf old grandma, what does she know? But my ears work just fine. Once she's gone, it's all ours, he murmured, voice low and excited. $11 million. No more begging the bank. My fingers tightened around the armrests. $11 million. The number I'd heard them dance around for months like it was the only interesting thing about me. I'd spent my life building that money. Up before dawn for years, running my little business, turning it into something worth selling when my body finally insisted I slow down. I always thought it would be my safety net, not my death warrant. Are you sure? His wife answered, a nervous laugh under her breath. This is a lot. You want to wait 10 more years? He snapped. She can barely move. A little push, an accident, and it's finally our turn. She's lived her life. Have you ever heard someone you love talk about your death like it's a scratch-off ticket they've been waiting to cash in? I wanted to turn around and scream, "I heard that, you fools! I'm not gone yet!" But in that moment, my voice stayed stuck somewhere between my heart and my throat, frozen by a fear I'd never admitted to anyone. Not of dying, but of dying knowing the people you raised saw you as a walking dollar sign. I felt the chair jolt then, hands on the backrest, the sound of shoes scuffing wood as they shoved. There wasn't even a count of 3. 1 second, I was on the dock. The next, the world dropped out beneath me. Cold water slammed into my body, a shock that stole my breath for a heartbeat. The wheelchair went with me, metal pulling like an anchor. Above the surface, through the rush in my ears, I heard his voice flip from greedy to frantic in an instant. "Grandma! Oh my God, Grandma! She rolled in!" he yelled, full of fake horror. His wife's voice joined in, high and shaking. "Call 911! She drowned! She just slipped!" Have you ever realized in the space of a few seconds that the story being told about you is a lie, and if you don't do something, that lie is going to become your whole legacy? They thought I'd just sink. They thought the chair and the years and the gray hair meant I was helpless. They thought the old woman they wheeled around had forgotten who she was before her knees gave out. What they forgot was that I grew up in water like this, in lakes and rivers and oceans, long before there was any money to argue about. They forgot I used to swim for fun, for work, for my life. They forgot what my own body remembered the second that icy water hit my face. In that cold, murky depth, another voice cut through my panic. Not theirs, not 911, not the little girl in me screaming. My own. It said, "You can swim. You survived worse than this. Move." My fingers fumbled at the flimsy lap belt they'd barely bothered to fasten, assuming I couldn't work it. The chair was dragging me down fast, bubbles roaring past my ears, but my hands remembered the motion. Click. The strap gave. I twisted, kicked, shoved myself free of the metal frame like shedding a skin someone else had chosen for me. I angled my body sideways, not up where they'd see the ripples, but out, under the dock. Above, they were still performing. I could hear splashing, their carefully rehearsed panic, his dramatic, "She's gone! She's gone!" echoing over the water. Underneath the boards, in the shadow where the light couldn't quite reach, I kicked, lungs burning for air, fingers clinging to the slimy edge of a support beam as I pulled myself along. Have you ever been more terrified for your dignity than your heartbeat? That's what it felt like. More afraid of dying the way they'd chosen for me, as the poor old lady who rolled herself into the lake, than of the cold itself. I didn't come all this way, live through poverty and war and childbirth and business deals and funerals, just to exit on a lie written by two greedy children. My chest screamed for air, but I kept going until I reached the shadow of the boathouse where the lawyer and I had installed a simple safety camera last month. They'd waved it off as paranoia. I'd called it insurance. They thought it was there to catch raccoons. They never thought it would catch them. I grabbed the submerged ladder, hauled my shaking body up one rung at a time until my head finally broke the surface in a pocket of darkness hidden from the dock. I sucked in a breath that tasted like mud and metal and revenge. They were still on the other side of the boathouse, still shouting into the phone, "She drowned! Send someone, please!" counting dollars in their heads instead of checking for a pulse. "You pushed my wheelchair into the lake for $11 million, I whispered to no one but the spiders and the camera light blinking red above me. "You forgot I can swim, and you forgot the camera doesn't lie." People see an old woman in a wheelchair, and they forget there was ever anything before the wrinkles. They see gray hair and liver spots in that damn chair, and they think that's the whole story. Nobody looking at me on that dock knew I was once the girl who used to dive off this very pier just to scare my mother half to death. Nobody knew these arms, soft and spotted now, once hauled crates of produce at 4 a.m, because if I didn't, the stall wouldn't open and the bills wouldn't get paid. Nobody knew that the $11 million they were whispering about by the water didn't fall from the sky. It came one sore back, one missed holiday, one risk at a time. I grew up in a shotgun house with more leaks than plugs, and a father who left more often than he stayed. My mother worked 3 jobs and still came home bone-tired and empty-handed sometimes. The only thing we had going for us was this land, this lake and a few acres my grandfather had clung to with both hands, while everyone around him sold theirs for pennies. "They can take a lot from ya," he used to say, hands on his hips, surveying the water, "but they can't take what you don't give 'em." I didn't understand it then. I understand it now. I left school early to help my mother, first at other people's stores, then at my own little table at the market. I sold tomatoes I'd grown on our patch of dirt, jars of jam I boiled in the dead of night, anything I could put a fair price on and look someone in the eye about. 1 table turned into 2. 2 tables turned into a small shop front. The small shop became a proper store. Our name on the glass, my fingerprint on every shelf. I outlived one husband to a heart attack and another to the bottle. By the time I hit 70, the store had grown into a chain of 3 small groceries. A big company came sniffing around, waved a number under my nose that would have made my younger self faint. $11 million after taxes if I signed on the dotted line and let them paste their logo over my name. I sat in their fancy office, fingers still stained from handling real food, and thought about my legs that ached in the cold and the way the stairs at the back of the house were getting steeper every year. I loved that store like a child, but I knew better than most that you can't put off endings just because they make you sad. So I sold. The papers called it a windfall. My family called it our blessing. I called it what it was, the price of my youth, paid all at once. The trouble with a number like that is that it doesn't just change your bank account. It changes how people look at you. Suddenly, cousins who hadn't called in years wanted to catch up. Church folks who'd barely nodded at me in the pews started inviting me to sit up front. My phone buzzed with investment opportunities, charities, and business ideas my grandkids swore were can't miss. I did what I thought was smart. I found a no-nonsense lawyer and a quiet financial planner who didn't flinch when I said I wanted to make sure I wouldn't be a burden to anybody. We put most of it into boring things, annuities, conservative funds, a trust or two, carved out some for my kids and grandkids in a will, made sure the taxes wouldn't eat me alive. I told my children, "You will all get something, but I'm going to spend my share of this living, not lying awake worrying about you waiting for me to die." They laughed uncomfortably. I meant it. Life, however, has a way of humbling even the stubborn ones. A small stroke at 78 stole half the strength from my right side. A bad fall in the bathroom added insult to injury. My doctor suggested, firmly, that I use a walker or chair for safety. My pride argued. My hip won. That's how the wheelchair came into my life. At first, it was just trips to the store or church. Then it became most days. My mind stayed sharp as tacks, but my feet refused to listen. That's when the shift started. The grandkids used to come around for cookouts, for help with homework, for my stories. After the chair, some of them stopped looking me in the eye. They talked over me, about me, around me. "Grandma needs this. Grandma can't do that," as if I weren't sitting 3 feet away. Others, to their credit, still saw me. My oldest granddaughter would bring her kids over and sit on the porch with me, letting them run around the yard while we drank tea. My youngest son called every Sunday, even if just to say, "You breathing? Good. Talk next week." They made my heart warm. But distance and busy lives meant they weren't the ones closest to me in miles. That honor fell to my middle grandson, Mark, and his wife, Tiffany. They lived in town, not too far from the lake. When my stroke happened, they were the first at the hospital. Tiffany brought a blanket from home. Mark held my hand while they poked and prodded. "We're here now," he said, eyes glossy. "We'll take care of you, Grandma." I believed him. When I got out, they started helping more than anyone else. They offered to handle my prescriptions, started picking up my mail. "No sense in you hobbling to the box in the rain," Mark said. They took me to my doctor's appointments, to church, to the grocery store if I insisted on seeing my own produce. They also started bringing up money more often than felt natural. "How's the nest egg holding up?" Mark would ask, casual at first. "You know, taxes are crazy on big estates. Maybe we should sit down and talk about how to protect it." Tiffany would cluck her tongue. "He's just worried, that's all. We want to make sure the family doesn't lose what you worked so hard for."
At first, I brushed it off. The lawyer and I have it sorted, I'd say. You kids just live your lives. But then, little moments started needling me. The way Tiffany's eyes lit up like Christmas when some financial show on TV mentioned inheritances. The way Mark joked at a barbecue, drink in hand, when Grandma croaks, I'm buying that boat. Then laughed too loud when I raised an eyebrow. Relax, Ma, you know I'm kidding. I wasn't entirely sure. Around the same time, my doctor suggested I move out of my old farmhouse into something safer. Fewer stairs, closer to help if I fell. Mark seized on the idea like it was a winning lottery number. You can't stay out here by yourself forever, he said. What if something happens and nobody's around? Come stay with us at the lake house. Fresh air, great view. We'll fix up the downstairs so you don't have to climb anything. The lake house had been in the family almost as long as the land itself. My grandfather had built the first dock with his own hands. We'd always kept it as a vacation place, rented it out occasionally when times were tight. Moving there full-time felt like giving up the last piece of the life I knew. But my oldest son's job had taken 3 states away. My daughter was battling her own health issues. My youngest had toddlers hanging off his legs. The idea of having someone in shouting distance if I slipped again was tempting. It'll just be for a while, Tiffany said, smiling too wide, until we figure out something more permanent. So I agreed. I moved into the ground floor bedroom of the lake house, my world shrinking to its windows, its porch, the view of the water. At first it was nice, peaceful. I'd watch the sunrise over the lake, remember teaching my own kids to swim off that dock. The chair was an annoyance, but not a prison. I could still pivot to the bed, still push myself short distances. Mark and Tiffany were doting in front of others. They brought me meals, fussed over my blankets, told visiting relatives how lucky they felt to spend this time with Grandma. People praised them. Those 2 were angels, folks would say, taking her in like that. Angels, I thought, don't keep a ledger in their heads. I saw the looks they traded when someone mentioned my will. I saw how quickly their tone changed when I said at a family dinner, I've been thinking of leaving a good chunk to the clinic that helped me after my stroke. They do such good work. Silence fell over the table. Then Mark cleared his throat. You mean after you see to your obligations to the family, right, Grandma? Tiffany chimed in. It's your money, of course, but it's also, the family legacy. We've been here taking care of you.
It would be hurtful if you didn't consider that. Hurtful. That word did something to me. I'd given my whole working life to making sure my children and their children had more than I did. Suddenly, my charity, my choices were a betrayal. Another time, I mentioned to my lawyer on the phone that I might want to increase the charitable portion of my estate. I didn't think they were listening. That night, I found the cordless phone back in its cradle, the line not quite hung up. Someone had picked it up quietly. Someone had heard. You sure you're feeling okay, Grandma? Mark asked the next morning, offering me my pill box. You've been talking wild lately. We don't want you making any big decisions when you're confused. Confused? I could still do long division in my head. I could tell you the name of every neighbor I'd ever had on this lake, but one fall in a chair, and suddenly my choices were up for debate. That's when I called the lawyer back and said, we need to tighten things up, so if anything happens to me, the right people see everything. She suggested cameras, small, discreet, motion-activated. Even if it just catches raccoons, it'll give you peace of mind, she said. And if it catches anything else, we'll be glad they're there. We put one above the front door, one in the living room, one under the eave by the boathouse, pointing at the dock. You can never be too careful around water, she said, half joking. Mark grumbled about Big Brother, but didn't object too much. Maybe he thought I was just a paranoid old lady trying to watch the birds. Maybe he forgot the camera was there as the weeks went by. What he didn't know, what none of them knew, was that in that same meeting with my lawyer, I'd already signed the papers that changed everything. The will redrafted, the trusts rerouted, the power of attorney moved out of his reach. On paper, he was no longer the golden grandson at the center of my financial universe. Emotionally, I still wanted to believe he was the boy who brought me dandelions, not the man who counted my years in dollar signs. That illusion finally shattered on that dock when I heard him say, as casually as ordering a drink, "She's lived her life," and felt those hands tighten on my chair. After we put those cameras up and I signed the new papers at the lawyer's office, the air in that lake house changed, even if no one could name it. On the surface, everything looked the same. Tiffany still brought me breakfast on a tray, all smiles, and "How's my favorite girl?" Mark still wheeled me out to the porch in the afternoons, talking about the news like we were just two old friends killing time. But underneath, there was a new tension, like a rubber band stretched just a little too far. They didn't know exactly what I'd done with the lawyer, but they knew I'd done something. I watched it dawn on them in slow motion. It started the day the lawyer left the house. I'd asked her to come out instead of me struggling into town. We sat at the dining table with my papers spread out, her calm voice going over every clause while Mark pretended to run errands, and Tiffany banged pans in the kitchen loud enough to eavesdrop. When the lawyer left, Mark appeared quicker than he ever had from one of his errands. "Everything okay?" he asked, too casually. "What did she need you to sign?" "Just updating some things," I said, folding the documents and sliding them back into the envelope. "People my age have to keep their ducks in a row." "Updating what?" Tiffany pressed later, when she was massaging my shoulders a little too hard. "You're not changing anything big, are you?" I looked her dead in the eye. A woman with $11 million in the bank would be a fool not to review her arrangements now and then, I said. "Don't you think?" Something flickered across her face then. Annoyance, fear, greed, all jumbled up. "Of course," she said quickly. "We just worry about you. You've been forgetting little things lately." That "forgetting" line became their new favorite toy. If I misplaced my glasses, Tiffany would sigh dramatically and say, "See, this is what we're talking about." If I repeated a story, Mark would smirk, "You told us that, Grandma. Might be time to let us handle the big decisions." I started noticing how often they used the words "handle" and "for you." "We can handle your mail for you. Let us handle the calls from the bank. You don't need to worry about handling that. Just sign here." They tried to slide a stack of papers in front of me one afternoon, all tabbed neatly with sticky notes. Just some routine stuff, power of attorney forms, medical consent, nothing dramatic. "It'll make it easier for us to talk to doctors and banks on your behalf. You know, be your voice." My voice still works, I replied, not taking the pen. And the last time I checked, my hands can still sign when I want them to. Tiffany laughed, but there was no humor in it. She said, "We're only trying to help you. You make it sound like we're trying to yank everything out from under you." I patted her hand. "If the shoe fits, dear," I said. That was the first time I saw genuine anger flash in her eyes before she smoothed it over. The more I resisted, the less careful they got about hiding their frustration. I'd catch them whispering in the kitchen with my name and words like nursing home, facility, and liquidate put a little too close together. "We can't afford to keep this place up and babysit her forever," I heard Tiffany hiss one night when she thought I was asleep. "Either she helps or she goes somewhere that Medicaid pays for. We just need to hold on until," then stopped when he realized the hallway creaked. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, remembering my grandfather's words about not giving away what you couldn't afford to lose. I thought he meant land. Now I realize he meant yourself. That's when the idea that they might not just be thinking about life after I died, but planning to hurry it along, moved from the back of my mind to the front. A few weeks before the lake, they took me to my regular doctor's appointment. The doctor, bless her, still talked to me like a human being. We went over my meds, my blood pressure, all the usual poking and prodding. Then out of nowhere she said, "So Mark tells me you've been feeling more confused lately." I turned my head slowly. "Does he?" I asked. "Funny, he never said that to me." She glanced between us, professional mask slipping for a moment. "Well," she said carefully, "he mentioned some forgetfulness, and as we age, it's something to monitor. But you've been sharp as a tack with me today." "I remember what matters," I said, looking right at him. On the drive home, Tiffany chirped, "See, this is why we worry. You don't even remember telling him you'd been confused." "I didn't tell him that. He told you that for me." The car went quiet. The main conflict had shifted again, from them pretending to help while quietly orbiting the money, to them trying to rewrite my reality in front of professionals. That's when I doubled our safety measures. I asked my oldest granddaughter to set me up with a simple feature on my phone, voice memos. "You going to record your memoirs, Granny?" "Something like that," I said. From then on, when Mark and Tiffany's voices dropped and the conversation turned to "after you're gone," I'd tap that little button in my pocket and just let it run. I caught it all. "We'll pay off the loans first. Then we can finally fix this place up right. Do you know how much 11 million can turn into if we invest it properly? What if she donates more to those stupid charities? That's basically stealing from her own blood." It wasn't just the money talk that set my nerves on edge. It was the way they started treating the lake as a character in our conversations. "Isn't it beautiful?" Tiffany would say, wheeling me down to the dock. "So peaceful. If I were old, I'd want to go out looking at this." Once Mark joked, "If I ever get stuck in a chair, just roll me into the water and collect the insurance." He laughed. Tiffany laughed. I did not. "You'll forgive me if I don't find that funny," I said. "People drown for real around here." "Oh, come on, Grandma," he said. "You act like we'd actually do it." I didn't answer, because that was the problem now. I no longer knew what they wouldn't do. One afternoon, when my daughter visited from out of town, I tried to hint that something was off. "The kids are very involved," I told her while she poured us tea. "Maybe a little too interested in the paperwork." She sighed, exhaustion in the lines around her eyes. "They're helping, Ma," she said. "I wish I could be here more, but you know how it is. At least you've got someone." Guilt is a powerful silencer. I didn't want to sound like a bitter old woman complaining about the only ones who'd stepped up. I didn't want to add to my daughter's burdens. So I let the subject drop and leaned harder on my lawyer and that tiny blinking camera under the eaves. The main conflict settled into a cold stalemate. Them circling closer around what they thought was their future, me pretending to be more helpless than I was, while quietly stacking Kindle under the lies they kept telling in front of my face. Every accidental near miss started to feel intentional. The time they forgot to lock the brakes on the chair at the top of the ramp, and I rolled a little too close to the edge. The pillbox mistake, where the dosages were off just enough to make me woozy. The suggestion that we disconnect the front camera because nobody's trying to rob an old lady out here. Raccoons, I said firmly. We're keeping it for the raccoons. I knew better. They did too. The last straw before the lake was simpler than all that. We were sitting in the living room, some forgettable show on the television, when a commercial came on for life insurance. The man on the screen promised, "Give your family peace of mind when the time comes." Tiffany said, without thinking, "Wish your time would hurry up a little bit sometimes." She clapped her hand over her mouth, eyes wide, but the words were already out. Mark laughed, that nervous cackle that sounds too much like his grandfather's. "Don't say that in front of her," he scolded, more out of form than conviction. "Why not?" she muttered. "She knows we're joking." I looked at them both and realized with a clarity that hurt that they no longer saw a line between wishing for my death in their heads and saying it out loud. From there, it was a short step to acting on it. So when they came into my room that morning and said, "Let's take you down to the water, Grandma. It's such a nice day," I smiled and let them wheel me out without a fuss. The main conflict had finally come to a head. They thought they were writing the last chapter of my story. They didn't know I'd already rewritten the ending and set up the camera to catch the climax. The day they finally did it, I can't say I was surprised. Hurt, yes, but not surprised. By then, the tension in that house felt like humidity before a storm. You don't know exactly when the sky is gonna crack, but your bones know it's coming. That morning started almost sweet. Tiffany knocked on my door with a brightness that didn't match the circles under her eyes. "Rise and shine, Miss Millionaire," she sang, pushing the curtains open to let the lake light in. "It's gorgeous out. We should get you some fresh air today. How about a little trip down to the water?" Fresh air, lake. On any other day of my life, those words would have sounded like a gift. Today, they felt like a script. I pushed myself up in bed, my joints complaining, my mind sharp. "The water, huh?" I asked, watching her face. "I thought you hated going down there. Always said the bugs eat you up." She faltered just a hair, then plastered on the smile again. "Oh, that's just at night," she said quickly. "In the morning, it's perfect. And you've been cooped up. Come on, it'll be good for you." When a person who's been complaining about something for months suddenly starts pushing it on you, pay attention. Somewhere in my chest, a little voice whispered, "This is it." I thought about saying no. I thought about faking a dizzy spell or a stomach ache, anything to postpone what my gut knew they'd been inching toward. But another, harder voice answered, "If not today, then soon. And if they do it in the bathtub, in the stairs, somewhere the camera can't see, will you be ready?" I'd built my life on facing things head on. I wasn't going to start dodging now. So I smiled back at Tiffany the same way I smiled at loan officers who told me no before I found the bank that said yes. "You know what?" I said. "That sounds lovely. Let me call your cousin and tell her about my big field trip." She laughed, but there was a flicker of something ugly in her eyes at the mention of someone outside the house. "You can tell her later," she said. "Let's just get you dressed first." "My phone is right here," I replied, picking it up. "I'll just be a minute." She hesitated, but left me alone, probably not wanting to seem too eager. As soon as the door clicked shut, I hit the speed dial my oldest granddaughter had set up for herself. "Hey, Granny," she answered, still half asleep. "You okay?" "I'm going down to the lake with Mark and Tiffany," I said, keeping my voice light. "Thought I'd tell you in case I fall in and come back as a mermaid." She snorted. "You and that dark humor. Call me after then, okay?" "I will." Then, more seriously, "If I don't call you by noon, you call my lawyer. Tell her to check the cameras." There was a pause. "Grandma?" she said slowly. "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about making sure somebody knows where I was last," I said. "Just humor an old woman, all right?" She sighed. "Okay, fine. Noon check-in. Don't go jumping off docks to prove a point." "I'll do my best." And I hung up before my courage slipped. When Tiffany came back, I let her help me dress, let her fuss with my blanket, let her wheel me out into the hallway. Mark was waiting by the front door, too cheerful by half. "There's my girl," he said, taking over the handles. "We've got you a front row seat to nature. Nature's been watching me for years. Time she saw you, too." The front camera above the door blinked its little red light as we passed under it. I said a silent prayer that its cousin down by the boathouse was awake and hungry for truth. The path to the dock was bumpier than it needed to be. Every rock that jostled the chair drove home the reality. If I'd changed my mind and tried to fight them out here, they'd always be stronger than my one good leg and my two old arms. But if I let them play their hand, if I survived it, I'd never have to convince anyone of their intentions again. The tape would do that for me. "You remember when you taught me to swim out here?" I asked as we rolled closer, watching their shoulders. "You were 8, hollering that the fish would bite your toes." Mark chuckled. "I was a scaredy cat," he admitted. "You dragged me in anyway." "I did," I said. "You cried, then you laughed. Once you knew you could float, you never wanted to come out." He didn't seem to catch the way my voice had gone distant, the way I was pulling that memory up, not to make small talk, but to remind myself I belonged to this water long before they did. At the boathouse, as we crossed from dirt to dock, I caught sight of the small, weather-worn housing under the eave, just where the lawyer's assistant had bolted it. From where they stood, it probably looked like nothing. From where I sat, it looked like a witness. "Careful on the boards," she said, as if I could do anything but sit. "They're slick." The dock creaked under our combined weight. The lake, usually a comfort, looked vast and cold. They parked my chair near the end, brakes clicking, a sound that I'd learned to distrust. "Isn't that view something?" Mark said, stepping beside me, his hand settling on the back of the chair in what might pass for affection in a photograph. Behind us, Tiffany's footsteps shifted, the wood groaning as she moved. I could feel the air thicken, like the moment before a wave breaks. Then I heard it, clear as if they'd spoken it into a microphone. "Once she's gone, it's all ours. 11 million. No more debt collectors. We can fix up this place, get that boat, finally live." "I still think this is crazy," she whispered back. "What if someone—" "Nobody's out here," he snapped softly. "It's an accident. Old woman in a chair by the water. People will say we were saints for even bringing her out." There it was. Not a slip of the tongue, not a dark joke. A plan. My fingers dug into the armrests. I had a split second to choose. Turn and scream, maybe buy myself a few days until they tried something again, or let them show the world exactly who they were, trusting my body and those little blinking lenses more than their mercy.
I thought of my grandfather, of my mother, of every time someone had told me I was smart for a woman, but still treated me like I couldn't handle hard truths. I thought of my bank statements and the way their names were starting to circle them like vultures in their whispers. Then, strangely, I felt calm. You always did want everything easy, I said quietly, so low I wasn't sure they heard. Guess we're all about to find out what that costs. I slid my right hand, the good one, down to the belt buckle across my lap and rested my thumb on the release, not pressing yet, just ready. The lap strap had never made me feel safe. Today, it was going to save me. Mark took a breath behind me. The doc shifted as both of them leaned in. "Ready, babe?" he muttered to Tiffany. "On 3. They thought they were counting down to my end. I knew better. I knew I was counting down to the part of the story where I finally stopped being the passive noun, grandma, the estate, and became the verb again, the one who moved, the one who acted, the one who swam.
3, he said, and before I could blink, the world tipped. There was no 1, 2, the way decent people count. Just his hands shoving hard on the back of my chair, the sickening lurch as the front wheels rolled over the lip of the dock, and then nothing under me but air and the flat gray face of the lake rushing up to meet mine. The cold hit like a slap. It stole the sound from my throat, punched the breath out of my lungs. The wheelchair went with me, of course, heavy metal and wet blankets tugging down, down, down. For a heartbeat, panic almost won. 79 years old, wrapped in someone else's idea of helplessness, and here I was, sinking like the burden they decided I was. But panic is a funny thing. It can drown you, or it can drag up every lesson you thought you'd forgotten. Somewhere in that icy mess, my body remembered what my mind almost didn't have time to say. I can swim. My thumb was already on the buckle. The second the cold shocked me fully awake, I pressed. The lap belt popped free with a tiny click you'd miss if you weren't listening for it. My hands pushed against the armrests, wriggling my hips and shoulders out of the seat as the weight of the chair tried to claim me. For a second, metal scraped my shins, my skirt tangled, my heart hammered so hard I could feel it in my ears. Then I was loose. Nothing between me and the surface but a few feet of dark water and the will I'd used 100 times to haul myself out of worse holes. I didn't go straight up. Instinct screamed to break the surface, to gulp air, to shout, "I'm still here!" But common sense and 79 years of knowing how people talk themselves out of seeing the truth told me if they saw me alive right then, they'd just find another way next week, someplace without a camera, without a witness. So I angled sideways toward the underside of the boathouse where the dock met shadow. Above, muffled through the water, I could hear their performance start. "Grandma!" Mark's voice, now loud and panicked, rang out over the lake. "She rolled right off! I couldn't grab her!" Tiffany's shriek pierced through his. "Oh my God! Call 911! She just slipped!" If I hadn't heard their plan a minute earlier, I might have believed them myself. They were that good. Years of church plays and social media smiles had trained them well. My chest burned. I let a few thin bubbles escape and forced my arms and legs to keep moving. Fingers found the slime-slick support beam, then the submerged ladder bolted to the pilings. I grabbed a rung, hauled myself up slowly, trying not to splash. When my head finally broke the surface in that shadowed pocket under the boathouse, the air felt like fire. I pressed my cheek against the cold wood, gulping it in, then held still, listening. "We're at 214 Lakeshore," Tiffany sobbed into the phone. "She's in a wheelchair. She can't swim. She just went under." "Stay on the line," a distant, calm dispatcher voice replied. "Do not enter the water. Help is on the way." "She's gone," Mark choked out. I can't believe it. She was just talking about changing the will." There it was, the little crumb slipped in for whoever was on the other end, setting the stage for his martyrdom. Poor grandson taking care of grandma until the bitter end, robbed at the last minute by fate and paperwork. I smiled then, a small bitter thing that had nothing to do with joy, because I knew something he didn't. The only paperwork that mattered now wasn't the old will he thought was going to hand him $11 million. It was the new one in my lawyer's safe and the digital record humming quietly a few feet above his head. The camera under the eave was motion activated. We'd tested it. A raccoon sneezes on the dock and that thing wakes up. 2 grown adults wheeling an old woman to the edge and shoving her in, it would have caught every second. I dragged myself up another rung, then another, until I could get a knee onto the lower platform. My limbs trembled, the lake sucking heat from me, but adrenaline does wonders. I crawled, dripping, along the narrow planks inside the boathouse, out of their line of sight. My emergency plan, hatched with the lawyer when I'd first voiced my fears, came back to me step by shaky step. There was a spare key and a cheap flip phone hidden in the old tackle box on the shelf, in case you ever need to call someone without them knowing it, she said. I fumbled it open with numb fingers, flipped the phone on, and dialed the one number pre-programmed in it. Hers. "Hello?" she answered on the second ring, professional tone dropping when she heard the raggedness of my breath. "It's me," I rasped. "They did it. At the lake." There was a beat of stunned silence, then steel slid into her voice. "Are you safe right now?" she asked. "Hidden under the boathouse," I said, wet and mad but breathing. "Good," she said. "Listen to me. Do not go back to the dock. Crawl up the side path to Peterson's place. Remember, the house with the red truck. I'll call him as soon as we hang up. He'll let you in. Police and paramedics are already on the way because Tiffany called 911. I'll meet you at Peterson's. And, Mrs. Harris." "Yes?" "The camera got it," she said. "Notification just hit my email. I haven't watched it yet, but we're downloading it to secure storage now." I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. "Then we're done pretending," I said. I hung up, tucked the flip phone into my bra, and crawled toward the boathouse door, leaving a thin trail of water like a snail. Outside, instead of turning left toward the dock and the wailing duo, I turned right toward the narrow, overgrown path that snaked around the bay. My hand slipped in the mud, my knee barked bloody protest, but every inch I put between myself and that staged tragedy felt like reclaiming something they'd tried to take. By the time I reached Peterson's back porch, my teeth were chattering so hard I could barely knock. He opened the door with wide eyes and a towel already in hand. My lawyer must have worked faster than I thought. "Lord have mercy," he muttered, bundling me in warmth. "They said you drowned." "Not yet," I said through clacking teeth, "but their chances just did." While he fussed, making tea and cranking up the heater, I sat at his kitchen table listening to the sirens in the distance, wailing closer to the lake house I'd just escaped. For once, they weren't coming for me. They were coming for the story Mark and Tiffany were spinning, and for the holes the footage and my living, breathing presence were about to tear in it. In my mind's eye, I could see it all unfolding. Paramedics arriving to 2 hysterical caretakers on the dock, police fanning flashlights over calm water, Mark wringing his hands and saying, "She just rolled in," over and over. And then, in a small office in town, my lawyer sliding a laptop across a desk, hitting play on a grainy but damning video of those same grieving faces, pushing my chair into the lake after musing about what they'd do with $11 million. The climax wasn't the splash. That was just physics. The real climax was the moment they'd realized the person they'd written off as an easy mark could still swim, still think, still plan. The moment the door of Peterson's kitchen opened again and my lawyer walked in with the police officer at her side, took one look at me sitting there, alive and dripping, and said, "Well, this just got a lot simpler." They didn't bring me back to the lake house. That was the first sign the tide had turned. When my lawyer walked into Peterson's kitchen with that officer behind her, she didn't waste time on pleasantries. She looked me up and down, taking in the wet hair, the blanket, the stubbornness I'm sure was written all over my face, and said, "Mrs. Harris, I'm very glad to see you alive." The officer nodded, jaw tight. "We've got units at your property now," he said. "They called saying you'd gone into the water and never came up. Imagine their surprise when we got word you'd turned up here instead." I almost felt sorry for Mark in that moment. Almost. I gave them my statement first, right there at Peterson's table, steam from my tea curling between us. I told them exactly what I'd heard on the dock, exactly how I'd gone into the lake, exactly how I'd gotten out. I didn't embellish. I didn't need to. The truth was damning enough. My lawyer filled in the rest. The prior conversations, the updated will, the cameras she'd insisted we install. When she mentioned the footage, the officer's eyes sharpened. "You're telling me you have this on video?" he asked. "The pushing the chair, the conversation beforehand?" "That's correct," she said. "The boathouse camera triggered at 9:42 a.m. The file is already backed up to a secure server. We can play it for you at the station." "Then let's go," he said. "We'll keep you here for now, ma'am. Someone will stay with you." I shook my head. "I'm not hiding," I said. "If you're going to show that tape, I want to be in the room." He hesitated, then nodded slowly. "As long as you feel up to it." I've felt up to worse, and I'm not starting my second chance at life by letting other people watch my attempted murder without me. They drove us in separate cars. I rode with my lawyer, wrapped in Peterson's biggest flannel, my hair still damp, but my back a little straighter with every mile between me and that dock. At the station, they put us in a small conference room. Ugly table, humming fluorescent light, everything smelling faintly of old coffee and disinfectant. On the screen in the corner, a frozen frame of the dock waited. My chair, their silhouettes. A few minutes later, another officer cracked the door. "They're here, still playing the grieving act." My lawyer's mouth flickered in something that wasn't quite a smile. She said, "Let them sit with that a moment, then we'll press play." I heard them before I saw them. Tiffany's high, breathless sobs, Mark's lower, broken-sounding voice saying, "I can't believe she's gone. She was like a mother to me." To anyone who would listen, they swept past the glass window without seeing in, heading down the hall. When the officer brought them into our room, leading with a practiced, "Right this way," the look on their faces when they saw me sitting there alive was something I won't ever forget. Tiffany went sheet white, her mouth opening and closing like a fish. Mark actually stumbled. "Grandma?" he stammered. "But they said you drowned?" I finished for him, raising an eyebrow. That was the plan, wasn't it? He shot a wild look at the officers, at my lawyer, as if searching for some script he could pivot to. This is a misunderstanding," he blurted. "She must be confused. She rolled in. I tried to—" "Save it," the officer said, his tone flat. "We're going to watch something together, and then you'll have a chance to explain." He pointed to the chairs. "Sit down." They did, stiff as boards. The tech in the corner hit a few keys. The image on the screen came to life. There we all were, grainy but clear. The wheelchair, the dock, the lake. The audio crackled to match. We listened to Tiffany's too bright voice suggesting fresh air, watched them wheel me out, heard Mark say, "Once she's gone, it's all ours. 11 million. The room was quiet, except for our past selves sealing their own fate. When the push came on the screen, my stomach still flipped, even knowing how it ended. My body remembered the shock, but my lawyer's hand on my arm kept me anchored to the present. Above the tinny splash, we heard their perfect little performance start.
Grandma! Oh my God, Grandma! She rolled right off. I couldn't stop her. Call 911! When the clip ended, no one spoke for a moment. The officer turned off the monitor, the click sounding loud. He looked at them both. Do either of you deny that this is you on this date at this time? Tiffany burst into tears, ugly and real this time. We were joking at first. We didn't mean it, just got out of hand. So you admit you pushed her chair, my lawyer cut in. You admit you didn't secure the brakes. You admit you knew she had limited mobility and you brought her to the edge of a dock anyway. Mark's face hardened. She's twisting it, he snapped at my lawyer. We were trying to take care of you, he shouted at me. We've been the only ones here. We're drowning in debt, trying to keep this place up, and you're talking about giving everything to strangers? So you thought you'd speed things along? I asked softly. Make the math easier? He glared at me. For the first time, I saw the boy under the man. The grandson who used to pull my hair and then cry when he got scolded, learning that tears can be a shield. You changed the will, he spit. You were going to cut us out after everything we did. How is that fair? Fair? I repeated. You want to talk about fair? I gestured at the screen behind him. It wasn't fair when your mama left you with me while she got her life together, and I raised you like my own. It wasn't fair when I gave you a job at my store after you flunked out of college. It wasn't fair when I co-signed that first loan you defaulted on. But I did it anyway, because that's what family does. I didn't ask for fair. I asked for one thing. Don't treat me like I'm worth more dead than alive. He looked away. Tiffany just cried harder. The officer cleared his throat. Mr. Harris, Ms. Harris, you are under arrest for attempted murder and elder abuse. You have the right to stay silent. The words rolled on, that cold rattling off of rights I'd only ever heard on TV. It sounded different when it was being read to people you used to tuck in at night. They put cuffs on them right there. Hands behind their backs, Tiffany whimpering, Mark going stiff. As they led them out, he twisted his neck to look at me one more time. You can't do this, he said. We're your family. You did this, I said back, and now you get to explain it to a jury. After they were gone, the room felt bigger, quieter. My shoulders slumped in a way they hadn't been allowed to in months. What happens now? I asked my lawyer. Now, she said, we make sure you're safe. We notify the rest of your family about the truth, not the story they tried to sell. We work with the DA, and we redo your estate plan one more time knowing exactly who's on which side. The resolution wasn't clean. Family rarely is. When the news broke, first as a short, shocking blip on the local station, then as a murmur over Sunday dinners, reactions ranged from horror to embarrassed avoidance. My oldest son called sobbing, apologizing for not being closer. He said, I knew Mark was greedy. I didn't think he was that. I looked at him over the foil and said, I did, in little ways. You heard what you could with what you had going on. That was the thing. I didn't want to spend the days I had left assigning blame like party favors. I just wanted to spend them with people who didn't see me as a walking check. We moved me out of the lake house within a week. The prosecutor's office put a restraining order on Mark and Tiffany. They weren't allowed within a mile of me or my property. The bail hearing was awkward. Seeing them in orange, shackled, head down, isn't a joy, no matter what they did. But when the judge denied them the chance to go back to the lake house to gather their belongings without supervision, a sliver of satisfaction slid through the worry. The lake house, my grandfather's pride, became quiet again. On my lawyer's advice, we locked it down, changed the codes, installed even more cameras. You can keep it or sell it. But for now, it's a crime scene and an asset. We'll decide later. I chose a small, accessible apartment in town, near my doctor and my church. No lake view, no wide porch, but it had ramps and grab bars and neighbors close enough to hear if I shouted. My oldest granddaughter helped me pick curtains and a new kettle. My youngest great-grandson brought me drawings of Grandma's new house. It was humbling to walk away from land my family had held for generations, but it was also freeing. The 11 million? We restructured it
One last time. The bulk of it went into a foundation I set up in my parents' names, earmarked for stroke rehabilitation, elder advocacy, scholarships for kids from our side of town who wanted to study nursing or social work. My other grandkids got their portions put into trusts they couldn't blow on boats, but could use for school, down payments, starting real businesses. As for Mark and Tiffany, my new will mentioned them only once, in a single line toward the end. To my grandson Mark Harris and his wife Tiffany Harris, I intentionally leave nothing. My lawyer arched an eyebrow when I added that sentence, but didn't object. You know this will probably circulate at every holiday after you're gone, right? She said. Good, I replied. Let it be a parable. The trial took months. I didn't attend every day. My body didn't need to sit on hard benches, listening to lawyers argue about my worth. But I was there when the tape was played in open court, when the jury watched their greedy conversation and that push over and over. I was there when the verdict came back, guilty on attempted murder, guilty on elder abuse. Their sentences weren't as long as some people thought they deserved, longer than others thought was kind. To me, the math was simple. They took a shot at my last days out of greed. Whatever years they spent staring at a concrete wall instead of a lake was between them, God, and the justice system. My part was done. The real resolution for me came in quieter moments. Sitting with my toes in a shallow therapy pool, legs weak but still mine. Laughing with my neighbor over bad soap operas. Watching my great-granddaughter read out loud from a book about women entrepreneurs and seeing her eyes light up when she realized one of them shared our last name. I sometimes think about that morning on the dock, about how close I came to being a cautionary tale instead of a survivor. But mostly, when I think of the lake now, I don't see the rusted metal of the chair sinking. I see the little girl I used to be, cutting through the water just because I could. The resolution wasn't that I got my money back, or that the bad ones got locked up. It was that I got myself back. The knowledge that even in a body that's slowing down, my instincts, my history, and my right to be here don't belong to anyone else. Getting old taught me something I wish I'd known when I was young. The scariest part of aging isn't your body slowing down. It's realizing how quickly people will rewrite who you are the moment they think you can't fight back. When I was in that chair on the dock, listening to the two of them talk about me like a scratch-off ticket, once she's gone, it's all ours, I felt something worse than fear. I felt erased. In their mouths, I wasn't the woman who'd built a business from nothing, The one who'd wiped their noses and paid their tuition and bailed them out of more than one bad decision. I was just 11 million, and a problem that could be solved with a push. That's the thing nobody tells you about money. It doesn't create greed, it just turns up the volume on whatever was already humming quiet in people's hearts. If there's entitlement hiding in a child, a big number will drag it into the light. If there's gratitude, it'll grow that too. I used to blame myself, sitting in that little apartment after everything, thinking, maybe I made them this way. Maybe if I hadn't helped so much, they wouldn't have learned to see me as a resource instead of a person. But the truth is more complicated and less comforting. You can give your children and grandchildren everything and still have some of them decide it's not enough. That's not your failure. That's their choice. What you are responsible for, at any age, is how you respond once you see what they've chosen. I could have closed my eyes to the jokes about boats and when grandma croaks. I could have let them bully me into signing away control for my own good and called it love. I could have stayed quiet about my suspicions because I didn't want to be the difficult old lady making waves. If I had, my story would have ended on that dock, and everyone would have clucked their tongues and said what a tragedy it was that poor Grandma rolled into the lake. Family would have hugged Mark at the funeral and told him what a saint he was for taking such good care of her. The camera would have recorded nothing but raccoons. Instead, I decided to believe my own eyes and ears over the pretty picture they were painting. I called the lawyer. I moved the power of attorney. I installed the cameras, and I told my granddaughter where I was going that morning and to raise hell if I didn't call back. None of that stopped the push, but it meant when it came, I wasn't walking into it blind. It meant their story didn't become the only story. People ask me if I regret trusting them in the first place. I don't. If you go through life refusing to trust anyone, you may keep yourself from being hurt, but you also keep yourself from being loved. What I do regret are the little ways I ignored my instincts to keep the peace. The first time Mark joked about my death like it was a future payday, and I laughed it off. The first time Tiffany called my thoughts confused in front of the doctor, and I let the conversation move on. The night I heard nursing home and liquidate whispered in my hallway and told myself, they're just stressed. Every time you tell yourself just, you sand a little edge off the truth. The lesson isn't never lean on family. The lesson is to watch who leans back with you and who leans on you like a step stool. When you're young, boundaries feel like something you draw with other people in mind, especially in our culture where elders are supposed to sacrifice until they've got nothing left to give. But getting pushed into that lake taught me boundaries are also promises you make to yourself. Promises like, I will not fund my own abuse. I will not leave my hard-earned life's work in the hands of people who can't even speak about my existence without dollar signs in their eyes. I will not let "but their family" be the only argument that matters. It's not selfish to change your will when someone shows you exactly who they are. It's not petty to put conditions on your generosity. It's not cruel to pick your own safety and peace over someone else's unearned expectations. If you're an elder listening to this,
I need you to hear this clearly. You are allowed to protect what you built. You are allowed to double check who has access to your accounts, to your house, to your medical decisions. You are allowed to say no even to the grandbaby you used to rock when that grandbaby starts circling you with more talk about after you're gone than how are you feeling today. That doesn't make you paranoid. It makes you a good steward of the life you sweated for. And if you're younger and you've caught yourself thinking, I can't wait until grandma's gone so I can finally... Well, maybe this is your sign to check your heart before life and a security camera check it for you. The last piece of this for me is the water. They chose the lake because they thought it was my weakness, deep, cold, and unforgiving. They never knew it was my oldest friend. That irony carries me through on the hard days. The way the very thing they thought would kill me is what I used to escape. The way they forgot that before I was grandma in the chair, I was a girl who could outswim boys twice her size. They thought they were writing my ending, pushed, drowned, inherited. But they didn't ask themselves the question I'd been asking my whole life. Who was she before she needed help? That's what I try to leave my great-grandchildren with now. Not just the story of the trial or the money, but the story of the girl, the woman, the fighter inside the grandmother they see. Because one day, someone will look at them and only see the surface too. And I want them to know that even if the world forgets, they don't have to. In the end, they pushed my wheelchair into the lake for $11 million. They said, she drowned, now we get the money. They thought that was the full sentence, but there was more to it. I can swim. The camera saw. And the story they were trying to write about me had to make room for the part where I climbed out of the water on my own terms and took the pen back.